Please welcome to the stage Kason Morris of Merck, Christian Fernandez of Mars, Ravin Jesuthasan of the Kellogg School of Management and Mercer, and moderated by Daniel Torrens of TechWolf. Please give them a round of applause.
Awesome. How's everyone doing today? Hopefully grabbing some lunch. Thank you all for being here. My name is Daniel Torrens, and I'm one of the advisors here for the Win-Win Workplace Summit. Let's give all of the leaders and the planners and the advisors a round of applause for planning such a great cross-functional event. And I'm also the head of partnerships here at TechWolf. I know we only have 20 minutes, so let's just jump right into it. I'm sure we've all heard throughout the conference that organizations are investing deeply into AI, they're investing deeply into workplace technologies, and also skill strategies, just like we've heard on the previous panel. But the question is still looming around, why isn't it being adopted? Why is there still struggles to execute this? And why is there limited business results in seeing this? And this is creating a real challenge for leaders in the room who are in HR, because at the same time, you're being asked to understand the impact that AI is having on roles. You're being asked to redesign and restructure your organization, all while bringing your employees along to upskill them for an AI-first world. And what we're hearing from a lot of our customers is not that they lack the tools, but they lack the visibility and data to understand what is the role that they should play and where they should start. But lucky for us, to answer those questions, we not only have some panelists who've been in the industry for a long time, but are trailblazers within this space that are actually helping their own organizations or helping their clients really begin to think about, how do we deeply understand work? By understanding work, how do we help our organizations redesign roles, restructure our roles, and most importantly, prepare for the future of work? So to help us diagnose this, I'm going to turn the attention over to our great panelists. I'm going to ask you guys the first question, if you guys can introduce yourselves, as well as answer the question. Kason, let's start with you. When we think about understanding the work, where are leaders misdiagnosing this problem? And from your perspective in doing the work at Merck, what are the root systems that we should be thinking about as a starting point?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Kason Morris, Managing Director, Future of Work and Enterprise Skills Strategy. And I think a lot of the keywords we've heard in different panels and throughout the Win-Win Summit today is this idea of execution. There's a reality that we are not connected to. We know we have to produce and we have to perform, but one of the biggest challenges I've seen in my current work, and even having done this with other organizations, is that very few organizations truly understand what the work is. There's a gross lack of visibility. So we're spending millions of dollars driving processes, driving technologies, thinking about people without really understanding the work. So what I coin and what I think about is this idea of, how do we move toward a world where we have more execution visibility? How do we start to ask some questions early at the intersection of people, process, and technology movements, so in that way we're making better informed decisions? And that's how I lead in relation to the projects and teams that I drive in doing the transformation work, within the life sciences industry at this time.
Christian, similar question to you. I know that you've been doing this work for quite a bit now, and your experience in helping organizations really rethink how to structure the organizations, where should roles go, what does that mean for the ripple effects across your organization? Where are leaders missing the point, and what is some insight that you've learned in your experience?
Yeah. So Christian Fernandez, global leader of strategic workforce planning and organizational design for Mars. I won't necessarily speak about everything that's happening within Mars currently, but I've been doing this work for, I would probably say, a good 6 or 7 years across financial services. So I'll probably speak a little bit about my experience there, because I think it's highly more applicable to some of the, question that you're asking, and also like the context of what's happening currently. If I had to sum this up to like 3 key things that I think need to be highly considered to make this effective, is, number one, what's going to be almost like the AI strategy, right? Like, what's the philosophy that we're going to introduce into the organization from an AI perspective? And what I mean by that is we understand that AI is freeing up capacity for the entire workforce to do more meaningful work, or for people to get redeployed across the organization, whatever the case is. But the reality is, if we don't have a commitment from our leaders or an understanding of what's the strategy with this capacity unlock, I think it's going to go in a very different direction. And what I mean by that is, like, I worked at a company called Prudential Financial, and they were very, very bold in the sense that they said, look, we're going to unlock X amount of capacity, and we started to have conversations essentially around who owns that capacity unlock. Is it the actual organization, or is it the employees themselves? And because of the climate at which Prudential was back then, essentially we decided that it was going to be a 50-50 split. So we were going to take some of those man hours and basically reallocate them back into our employees, meaning that if employees needed additional time to either upskill or reskill themselves, they could take that time and reinvest it. If they needed to take that time to, maybe reduce the amount of work hours throughout the course of the week, then we were also going to allow that. While at the same time, we also understood that from an organization perspective, like we needed to increase our revenue margins. So we took some of that capacity unlock and basically redeployed that and reinvested back into the business. So I think that's probably like the number one thing that I would highlight. It's a mentality change, it's a cultural change, it's a shift in mindset on how you position some of this stuff. The second thing that I'll probably say is you need to, from an HR perspective, more specifically, it's what's the service delivery model in this current state, right? Like the old operating model of how HR was delivering value to organizations, like I don't think that's relevant anymore. And followed by that is what are the capabilities that we within HR need to build? And it could be workforce analytics, workforce intelligence, it can be skills assessment, it can be organizational design, strategic workforce planning, all those capabilities, and I don't mean capabilities in the sense of skills only. I mean capabilities in the sense of like processes. How do we deliver value back to the business? Technology, what are we going to do versus what the solution is going to do for us, and so on and so forth. And the last one is what I probably say is you have to start with the work. I've seen, many companies went down the path of we're going to start with the skills. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I think it's a critical, data element that's needed to do this, future of work transformation. But for the most part, you have to start with the work. Like that's the common denominator across the entire organization, and that's also the language that the business speaks. So if you're able to speak in that language and bring that work intelligence, I think the remainder of the data elements that you have, you'll be able to push them forward.
I'm going to give the microphone over to our friend Ravin. Ravin, you help hundreds of clients, redesign their roles, redesign their organizations and structures. Curious to hear from you when you're working with your clients. Ultimately, what are we looking to accomplish or drive across organizations when we're redesigning the roles? And any other root issues that you're seeing employers encounter as they're trying to do this work?
Yep. Thanks, Daniel. So Ravin Jesuthasan, I wear a couple of hats. I'm an executive fellow and member of the faculty at Kellogg, where I teach the Reinventing Work and Organizations course, and I also lead the transformation consulting business at Mercer. I think there is a real tendency on the part of many business leaders who get spun up in the AI hype to spray and pray with the technology, kind of hoping that we'll deploy it and we'll get adoption and magic will happen and the four of us will use the technology in the same way and we'll all be automatically productive in the organization. To the point Christian has made, this is not a technological challenge, right? This is a mindset, skill set, and tool set challenge. And what we're calling for is the reinvention of 150 years of how we have thought about work. Those jobs that have been calcified in place for decades are rapidly we're seeing elements of those jobs be substituted, other elements be augmented, and yet other parts of the work be completely transformed, creating the space for new human work and new human skills. So I really believe that work design needs to be a core capability, and I want to just punctuate a point Christian made. I wrote an article for the Sloan Management Review last year, and it was work that my team and I led at a very large global financial services company. And we deployed an agentic platform at the organization. The company had a business case, felt completely flat. We went back in and redesigned the work and freed up 45% of the labor capacity. Now, what we said to the CEO was, you've got 3 choices and they aren't mutually exclusive. You could take some of this as margin, like any good CEO might, and keep your shareholders happy. And you can actually free up some of this capacity to take on more growth by addressing a very crummy customer experience that you have and improving your customer retention, improving your share of wallet, and actually growing the business with the talent that is most experienced in your organization. And then your third option, again, these aren't mutually exclusive, you could actually create space for learning and well-being in the flow of work and address that 40% turnover rate that you have in your workforce. And to his credit, he said, I think we'll take a little bit of all 3, which I thought was an extremely enlightened choice. And they redesigned their jobs not to 100% of time, but to like 90% of time. And the idea being that we want to be intentional we know AI is not going to stop. It is going to keep changing the work. So how do we keep the talent we've invested billions in for decades relevant for a changing world? How do we help them have agency over their own journey of reinvention and to be able to give them the space to redesign their own jobs, to acquire new skills, to reskill themselves with the right signals from a platform like TechWolf, shameless plug there, so that they can actually own their own journey of reinvention.
And we're talking a lot about understanding the work. We're talking a lot about role redesign and some of the use cases. Kason and Christian, question for both of you guys, because you guys are kind of in the middle of this. To break it down to the actual data and insight, what is that data and insight look like? What are you doing with that data and insight? If you guys can shed some light into both of those.
I'm happy to start. And in my current work, we have an interesting view, and this is subjective to every sort of business, so take it with a grain of salt. Given the life sciences space, the goal and desire is to make sure that we're going to market with drugs at a greater capacity in a shorter amount of time. And in order to do that, the driver is we need to understand what our capabilities are, both at an org capability level and at our people capability level, to understand, how do we put the right capabilities in the right place to do that. Thinking about people capability, the intention here is, to Christian's point, skills are a component of what this business wants to know about their talent. They also want to know what are the experiences that the talent has. Have you worked in certain therapy areas? Have you worked with certain modalities? So these are things that you can't neatly capture in a skill word. Or do you have a certain knowledge base that might be very useful for developing a new drug? So thinking about this intersection of these different data points, it was really, really important for me to work with the business to break down what mattered. And now we have a couple of initiatives, one which TechWolf is supporting to help us build that skills data foundation, but then we're also working internally to codify and build that foundation around knowledge and experience values that matter to the business. And once we build that foundation, the goal is, again, to unlock capacity, to understand, what do we have, what do we need, and then what kind of decisions are we going to make for gap closures, all in the spirit of driving business outcomes.
But for you, Christian, on the data piece, what data are you looking for, and then what are all the ripple effects and the HR processes that you're using that for?
Sure. So I'm going to speak a little bit more from the practitioner lens and from the work intelligence lens, right? So when we ran this, I wouldn't call it a pilot, when we ran this approach basically in one part of the organization, what we did is we started off with an inventory of all the business processes that are executed, an inventory of all the tasks that are basically also being executed, right? Whether that's being done, through automation, whether it's being done through humans or whoever the case is. But the critical data points that we brought to the table from a work intelligence perspective is when we were able to put in front of the business leaders what we would call is by body of work or by business processes, this is the FTE equivalent that it's taking you to basically execute this body of work. The second thing is we also brought in the compensation information, right? To be able to give them a cost associated with that body of work. And then the third thing that we said is how fragmented is the work? Is the way have the roles been designed in a way that the person that's executing the work can successfully execute the work? How many people are basically touching this? And I think when you put that in front of a business leader, you'd be surprised at the reactions that you're going to get from them. I would probably say in 90% of the cases where we brought this information forward, they had no idea what it was costing them. They had no idea what the FT equivalent was that they needed to basically execute this. They had no idea, from a man-hour perspective, how many man-hours were actually going into this. And then once we put that information in front of them, we were able to, bring some of the other information where it's okay, well, did you also know that you have retention issues? Did you also know that you have, leadership effectiveness issues? And then it became this whole transformation roadmap to be able to evolve the specific function or organization. And I think if you start with that data, then you start to create better partnership with the actual business leaders.
And then, Ravin, thinking about now how, with the data and the ripple effects and working with the business leaders, how you drive this effectively across the organization while bringing employees along for the journey. What are some of the best practices that you've seen some of the clients you work with in not just getting the data and doing the role redesign, but that communication of why this is important for future-proofing the organization and aligning stakeholders to encourage and inspire employees to come along for the journey?
Yeah, it's really essential that there may be top-down mandates, but the redesign of work really needs to be bottoms up, because I think to the point that both of these guys have made, nobody knows the work better than the people who are actually doing it. And we could have the most tightly scripted process. There is always a fire that someone has to put out every day, as we know. And unless she's at the table helping you redesign that role, you are going to have a massive miss. So the thing that we've seen consistently with organizations who do this well is they do three things well, right? They give people a reason to be involved. They give them they allow them to be involved. And there's also the promise, for want of a better phrase, of a safe landing, right? I want you to be fully vested in this journey, and I'm going to ensure that there is an opportunity. I've got an airline client, believe it or not, who changed their value proposition from a traditional paternalistic airline proposition with this promise of never being laid off and a job for life that might have applied to people's grandparents, to actually saying, we will develop you for opportunity, either within or without, which is an incredibly bold statement to make, which is, I can't promise you work for life because it is going to change. I will promise you relevance. I will help you stay relevant as you redesign the work. And if there isn't the space or we choose to part ways, I will promise you a safe landing, whether that's back at school that we're going to give you a stipend for, or whether it's placement in the hospitality industry because our training is so darn good. So I do think there has to be real ownership. And the challenge is, I'll go back to that example I shared, right? The pace of change we're talking about is it's going to accelerate, and this is never an event. It's a journey of perpetual reinvention. And so unless we equip the workforce to keep reinventing, and you can't reinvent on a Saturday night when the kids are in bed, right? So we have to be intentional in designing that space for learning and well-being into the flow of work.
Awesome. Well, we are getting the signs that it is over. But I just really want to encourage all the HR leaders to really get involved in the conversation and understanding what is the work, how is work changing, how do you do that data? Because we're all going to be in a much better position to guide people towards more meaningful opportunities once we understand the work and we deeply understand people. We'll be here for the rest of the conference. We're looking forward to continuing the conversation with everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you to our panelists.